Welcome to Tech Talent Today, where IT leaders share their tough challenges, creative solutions, and latest insights. You'll discover fresh ideas and inspiration here with your host, IT staffing veteran and president of Claremont Technologies, Jody Kulik-Mayer. And now, here's Jody.
Welcome to Tech Talent Today. I'm your host, Jody Kulik-Mayer. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Amy Lackey, a human resources executive who has spent the last 27 years of her career at Accenture. In 1995, Amy walked up 2 floors after answering an ad in the paper for a project financial analyst at Andersen Consulting. In 1998, as the company became Accenture, she moved into HR and for the past 5 years focused on HR for Accenture's technology practice. She was there until September of this year when she left to pursue her next adventure. Amy is a mom to wonderful teenagers Sam and Jack, a Snoopy Labradoodle, Fifi, her cat, 2 fish, and a bearded dragon named Dundee. Amy sure has a full house. Amy has volunteered at multiple drug and alcohol rehabilitation nonprofits for the past 10 years and is passionate about DEI, mental health, LGBTQ community, and corporate citizenship. Welcome, Amy. Thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, good morning. I'm excited to be here, Jody.
Thanks for coming. So you were at Accenture for over 27 years, and you launched some great programs. The Return to Work program, helping people relaunch their careers after they've been out of the market, and the Reinvigorating Women in Tech, which was called Accent on Technology Women. So how did those programs come about?
Yeah, great. Thanks for asking. Yeah, the last 6 years from in my HR career, I was focused on our technology individuals. And one of the things that we found in technology was that we didn't have a lot of women. And we didn't have a lot of diversity as well when it comes to, Hispanic Americans, African Americans, etc. But we got a new lead for our technology in North America who happened to be a woman. And what she wanted to do is inspire women in technology. So that was just the catalyst for all of it. It was, how do we get women excited about technology? How do we get them in a community together when they're smaller? There's 700,000 employees at Accenture. So, it's about making big kind of small. And then we had a business problem. As a human resource lead, it was, mine to solve being a strategic advisor to our business. And it was, we weren't as diverse in technology, just by the nature of the beast. And so we were trying to hire in females into the technology practice, and we couldn't find them in the marketplace. They just weren't there. And so we were starting to look at, along with reinvigorating technology within Accenture women, we were looking at how can we solve this business problem and bring an untapped source of talent into Accenture. And it just so happened that our CEO at the time for technology in North America had gone to Kellogg, and she knew an individual who started a company called iRelaunch, which was about bringing people who had been out of the workforce for like 18 months or so back into the workforce. And so she had this idea of maybe that would work, right? Maybe that's the unsourced talent that we need to tap. It's people, not necessarily just women, but people who had been on a career break, right? Whether it was taking care of children, whether it was dealing with an elderly parent, maybe they had to, because of their spouse, take a leave, etc. And they had this huge gap in their resume. And it was impossible based upon, the LinkedIns and the Indeeds and all the sourcing to kind of explain that gap, right? And there was this unspoken, what have you been doing for the last 10 years or 5 years? And so what we did was, at the time, they said, well, let's partner with iRelaunch. We don't know what we're doing. We've never done it, right? And these are the experts. So we invested, we as an Accenture at the time, invested, some capital into developing a program. And so that was just the first step, was we want to do it, we have an idea, and we're willing to put the capital behind it. And so I ended up actually being the first program manager of the entire program. And, from soup to nuts, we'd never done it, we'd never partnered with anybody, so it started that way. And at the same time, simultaneously, we were doing some things to set up some communities of practice for technology women within different locations within Accenture. So that's kind of how it got started.
Right. So the programs went hand in hand.
Yeah, they were simultaneously run.
Right. Right. And did people from the relaunch program go into the technology program sometimes?
They did once. So we started the relaunch program. It took about 9 months from inception idea all the way through having our first class graduate and be hired into Accenture. And while they were, I don't like to call it interning because these are middle level executives that are returning to the workforce. These aren't college graduates, they're not interns. We call them relaunchers. And we exposed them to the Accent on Tech women, to the communities while they were working on their projects, and we were training them and grooming them to be Accenture employees.
Right. And how long was the training program? Was it like a training program? Then they would interview? Like, how did the program? What were the nuts and bolts?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I love to talk about it. So it's just the most exciting thing I've ever done, honestly, in my 27-year career in human resources. They were hired in um, as temporary workers, right? Hourly workers, and then they had a 12-week um, orientation, training, and on-the-job experience program. And at first we did it. We did the project planning at sort of in the waterfall
Right.
technique, right? But then we ended up being very agile because it we what we found out was, you know, these people had backgrounds in technology, Jody. They had Java, they had JavaScript, they had C++. They had some of the backgrounds. They could do some of the infrastructure engineering. Maybe they had some testing from way back, right? So they weren't coming in with no skills, right? And we educated them on some of the methodologies, specifically around infrastructure engineering. I have to say that's what we focused on most because that was more the
Mm.
basics and the programming. But what we found was they need less training on specific technology because they're smart and they could learn new technologies, right, on the job or just by taking some courses online. What they really needed was how to integrate back in the workforce, right? So we ended up spending a lot of the first few weeks building some sort of a self-esteem,
Wow.
right? Just, how do you go, what is the workplace like now? How is it different? You've got virtual versus not virtual. You have a lot of different slangs and terms, and they were just rusty.
Right.
And it took a few weeks to get them on board, to get them comfortable with the fact that they had skills, they had proximity skills. We were setting them up for success and that they should have that self confidence to get back in the workforce, specifically at a large organization. And then we did a couple of weeks of just kind of on the job basic training for technology. And then they actually went out for 9 weeks, 8 to 9 weeks, and did a job from a business consulting standpoint. They went out on a project, had a role, actually reported to a supervisor, nothing different than a basic employee.
So,
And at the end, yeah, and at the end it was, do we want to hire them or do we not want to hire them? And we ended up hiring all of our first 9 cohort.
wow, that is
And
spectacular.
yeah, over 60% are still there and getting promoted and exciting. And that was the most rewarding point was having someone who didn't have hope out of the marketplace, but had the skills and being that vehicle to connect the two.
Right. There's there's so much there. It's such a
I
great
know.
it's such a great thing to help people fill a gap in their resume because
Hmm.
that is an area of concern when you're trying to get back in the marketplace, and it's even
Hmm.
something that I address like in blogs or on a video because people worry about that. So to get an opportunity to work at such a prestigious company like Accenture that has a
Right.
training program, So how many years ago was this that you're saying that there's 60% are still there? Like, what's the timeline?
Yes, so we started very small in a with 9 people in the Midwest, working on clients in the Midwest, sort of like the Best Buys, the Walgreens, those kind of things. And and the first year was completely, Jody, this is what's incredible, right? The first year was completely pro bono. Like it was invested, the company invested in it, and there was no cost to the projects, to the executives for the
Mm.
work. The second year, it went to 50% because they started seeing the value. They saw it. These women and men are coming to the workplace as an experienced hire, basically. And we're not having to invest in recruiting,
Right.
right? Which is another problem solver,
Yes.
right? And so the second year they did it, it was done in the Midwest again, and then it has evolved until we're doing it in all areas of the country, in the South, the Northeast, the Midwest, and the West. And it's grown to over 35.
Wow. That's spectacular. And you said five
And
years it's been, or how long has it been?
it's been, inception was at
Right.
5, pretty much it's had 4 cycles.
Right. Spectacular.
So it's very, very exciting. In fact, a plug, they're on LinkedIn. If you go out to Accenture, they're looking for their next group of people who want to sign up. That's how fabulous it's been.
Right. I've been seeing that in my feed. So that's,
Oh,
yeah,
good. Yes.
it's great. It's great that the program is continuing. You must feel really good about
Hmm.
that because that's something that was your baby.
I feel great about it. I feel great about it. I beam when I talk about it. Just, I was able to extend the offers for employment to the first cohort myself personally, and just to see the gratitude, just to see the excitement. And I mean, quite frankly, I love technology. I was excited about having the skills in, and it was solving a business problem. So it was a win win all the way around. But to see the success continue has been so rewarding.
Wonderful. So tell a little more about the accent on technology women.
Sure, sure. Uh, we had technology women. There are technology women all over the country, right? And it was about getting the technology women together and forming relationships and having networking and training, etc. It wasn't about social interaction, right? It was funded completely for events quarterly, and then virtual events whenever you wanted to have virtual events. But really, it started as, let's put someone in Houston, for example, or in Charlotte, and let's get all the technology women that we know of right now in technology together. And there were training sessions, i.e., do you know about blockchain? What do you know about the cloud migration? Like, let's get our technology women as versed and as trained and as significant as we can in the technology practice. And then let's focus on, how do we network? How do we get the best roles? What is our position specifically around career development, and what do we need versus others? And then there was some social, but it was very much focused on skilling up and or upskilling, and then also creating this sense of learning and excitement about it. We had all kinds of guest speakers, etc. And so it's just continued to grow and grow. When it was started, it was in 9 locations, and of it was probably connecting with about 60% of the technology women in the North America practice, which is over 5,000. And so getting that together and keeping those chapters, as we called them, going in each of the cities, and then bringing them all together to do large learning has just been phenomenal. And the success of it is not a metric. I mean, yes, we look at how has progression increased, how are people matched better with their roles and their positions, are we retaining them? But the success was really that, after the couple of years, there was no funding for the program, as with typical with many companies. But it's kept on. It's kept going because it's so important for the women to get together and to share their excitement about technology and to learn and grow. So it's been fabulous.
So the women on their own kept getting together.
Yes,
Wow.
yes. Yeah, I know, right? It's been very, very, very cool to see.
That's great because then it's like real relationships and like real networking.
Exactly, exactly. And it just spurned from this idea about reigniting the excitement about technology. And it turned into something that has lasted for 5 years and has grown and it's been sort of a staple in technology across North America.
Right. So now that you've done these two programs, um,
hmm
is there any like lessons learned and things that you would do differently if you're going to do them again?
If I was going to do the two programs again, I definitely would have started more agile than project planning for sure. But I don't know that there's so much I would have been done differently. If I said I would do it differently, then I wouldn't have learned and what I learned and be able to say, okay, here's the pitfalls, here's what you need to look at. Here are the things that are important and not important. I think that it was something needed, and so if you build it, they came.
Right.
And so, it was lessons learned throughout, but I don't know that I would change anything at this point, other than, if I had funding for, larger and larger events, but within the parameters of which companies have to work, I feel like, if you have the backing from the top down and you have the people that are hungry from the bottom up, then it's not going to matter.
Right.
It's going to come together. All you need is a facilitator and not necessarily some big defined program, right?
Right. Because, right, it looks like the women in technology took on a life of its own.
It did.
Great.
Definitely
Yeah.
did.
So, when we were speaking beforehand, you had thoughts on starting programs in the diversity space and that you know
Yes.
what companies need and don't need. So, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. That first of all, that's a broad statement. I don't know that I necessarily know what every company
Right.
needs, but from my
Mm-hmm.
experience in diversity, and when I say diversity, I not only mean African American, Hispanics, women. I also mean mental health, LGBTQ, etc. Military spouses. Those things. The one thing that I noticed that companies do, some companies do, and what, in my experience has not worked is, first of all, not understanding what problem you're trying to solve.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes diversity is not a problem.
Right.
It's just not exactly, where our leadership would like it from a metric standpoint or et cetera. So using data, first of all, to kind of, hone in on exactly what your issue is. Is it you're losing, more diverse individuals than you're retaining? Is it that your population is not on the average from a diversity standpoint? Is it that, more people call in sick if you're in a smaller company? I mean, it could be many, many things that you're trying to solve. But the thing that I find is, I call it slapping in some sort of program is not necessarily the answer. And I was talking to my son, who happens to be a trans
Mm-hmm.
male, in high school, and we were talking about the future of the workforce and what he needs as an individual, being a diverse individual. If you were in a company tomorrow, what would you need? He's like, I don't need anything other than to be treated exactly like everybody else.
Right.
And what that spoke to me, and what it said to me was, you know look at the metrics, look at the data, talk to the people, find out, are they not being treated like everyone else, and what does that look like? And then if you're going to put a program in place, it's got to be something, again, with the top down, bottom up, right? It's not necessarily that all this action needs to be taking place around a program, right? It's just that it needs to be some sort of vehicle by which support is shown for diverse individuals, and diverse individuals are able to talk and discuss around the fact that they may feel different, they may feel like there's some unconscious bias, and then kind of address, what does that mean and what do we need to do about it. And having a diversity officer and having someone focused on that in a company is so critical.
Right. Right. And really, with like how many jobs are open in the marketplace, like we need everybody to participate. And
That's right.
you also get better outcomes with more perspective and different
Agree.
ideas. So
I agree.
it's
I'm a big believer in The investment has to be in the
Mhm.
workforce itself as well as the leadership.
Right.
It's a two-way street. That's one of my big just one thing I really really believe
Mhm.
in,
Yeah.
because I have a responsibility myself as an employee to be engaged and to further my career and to speak out. And it's up to my company to have that vehicle by which I can do so, and that culture by which I feel comfortable.
Right. Right. Now that makes sense. And you also mentioned mental health. So, what are your thoughts
Yes.
on like a mental health program, or how do you foresee that?
Yeah, thanks for the question. And mental health is so broad. It was funny, Jody. I was just seeing something on the news yesterday about looking at mental health for women who are going through menopause.
Right.
Just adding, like, there's so many layers to mental health because we bring our whole self to work, which is, our mind, our body, and our spirit. So, we have to address all of those things. And the thing about mental health is, one, it's just awareness. And I think a lot of people are aware. It's just we've got to get the taboo away from it, right? It's, talking about depression, talking about anxiety, talking about menopause, talking about addiction. I mean, that's one of the big ones that I think is very prevalent in America.
Hmm.
I mean, over 50% of households are affected by someone they know or someone they're related to from a drug or alcohol abuse.
Wow, that's a
Um,
shocking statistic.
it is a shocking statistic. So 50% of people have a relative or someone close to them suffering. And so that, to me, and especially with the high pressure work environments that we're in today, that it's something in the mental health field that I'm much an advocate for, like, kind of bringing to
Hmm.
light, because a lot of mental health, depression, anxiety leads to substance abuse and vice versa. And so, one of the things from a mental health perspective is I think you got to make sure you have it broad enough, right? You're kind of looking at all the areas. And to me, right now, it's a lot about education and safety, trust and transparency. Like, we all have something at home, we all have something, in ourselves, right, that we probably need to be able to express. And like I said before, we bring our whole selves to work. So if you want to have a positive employee, someone who, let's get statistic, right? Less PTO days, harder workers, more deliverables, all that, we have to address the person. And so for me, I think, like, as people, as companies expand into the mental health area, just making sure that they're looking extremely broadly and that they're creating a vehicle of a transparency and communication and trust and safety versus programs right now. I mean, I think programs are really, really important, but I think, before you have a program, you have to have this core um, group that can be able to communicate and be able to feel safe and trusted and know that it's important to the leadership and important to the people.
I think it's challenging to find the group who is safe and trusted because
It is.
even with HR, um, like my husband said to me one time when I worked for another company, don't go to HR. They look out for the company, not for you. So that
Right.
those perceptions are out there, whether it's true or not, that's out there. And I just wonder, you may not know the answer, but like how you
Mhm.
address that with, the trust.
Yeah, well, we talked about that a little bit in some of our conversations around making big small, first of all, at a company, right? Like, you have to make it smaller. And so you have to have your trusted circle, whether it's your supervisor, your manager, your counselor, whatever the nomenclature is that you're using for your trusted circle. And it's important to establish that at work. And it's a two-way street. It's a two-way street. One of the things that I think is really important, from a human resource standpoint, because that's my forte, is that we are trusted advisors as HR. You know, yes, I may do payroll. Yes, I may do benefits. Yes, I may be employee relations or recruiting or whatever. Or I may be an HR generalist that has 100 people that, they support. But the thing is that I need to be educated. I need to know how to talk to people about that. I need to know how to connect the right resources with the people. So whether, there's an employee resource group or there's, a legal or employee relations person, just being educated myself as an HR and being an advocate is so important. So the HR managers or leaders out there, that is I think that training and that type of training to help our people feel safe, seen, connected, and courageous, I think that is time and money well spent for our HR professionals because they are the front line. And we don't want to be, bean counters, number takers, or you're afraid when they pick up the phone that, it's not going to be a good situation when an HR person calls
Right.
you, which is not true. You have had to know that. And then the second thing is that, um, we do have to make big small. We have to form those relationships. And I'm not the expert on it. It's going to take commitment. It's going to take commitment by the person, by the company, by the managers, by the supervisors. But one thing that I found makes it a little more successful in my mind is that it is measured and it is important, and a person is held accountable for their stewardship and their building of relationships within the company. I mean, that has to be one of the number one priorities. But you're not going to retain people, you're not going to attract them, et cetera, if you don't have that. And I think so much is around, revenue and profit sharing and business, and that's all good. It's all great. I mean, that's how we stay employed.
Right.
But the more a leadership focuses on this is important and this is not a core value on a website, this is a core value that we live and we show it by the fact that we invest training, we invest time, we invest money into making sure that we're forming trusted and transparent relationships with our employees.
Right. And I think that leads to good business. Right.
It
Right.
does. It
People
does.
who are invested in the company, people who care that they do a good job and take care of the clients. So it
Yes.
could be a win
Agree.
all around and for retention purposes.
I agree. I think that, when we're where we are recruiting individuals in, I think, we do kind of screen interviews and skills interviews and all that, but there has to be this layer by which you know that the person is a fit for the company.
Right.
And if they're going to be a fit for the company, then the company has to have it out there as far as, not only what they believe in, but what they do.
Right.
And then the person, because if you get the wrong person in the door that's not committed to the company and the type of company that you are, then you're not going to be able to retain them
Right.
long term. And so I think when we talk about retention, for example, then I think what you're talking about, starts with the very beginning from a recruiting standpoint and then continues to evolve and build and grow.
Right. I remember when we were first talking, I asked you, like, what do you get asked about the most? And I
Hmm.
was surprised at your answer. Well, you said that, like, how people come to you and say, how do I navigate my career at this huge, complex
Hmm.
company? So
Hmm.
I think a lot of the listeners would be interested in your answer to that as well.
Yes. When people come to me, a lot of times if they're not progressing or their career development's not where it is, or they're not as skilled, or they want to take a different um,
Mm-hmm.
journey in the same company, et cetera, like what they're concerned about, sometimes I think that companies automatically assume that there's an issue, whether it's diversity and inclusion or age or skills or whatever it is. But most of the time, it's people just don't know how to navigate within their own organization. I mean, we have verticals and horizontals and, it's
Diagonals.
amazing. Yeah, exactly, right? And so the thing that I give people the advice about is I don't want to say know where your bread is buttered because that sounds very transactional, right? But is know who your advocates are and who the decision makers are. And that's going to be making big small, right? So many times employees put their head in the sand and they say, if I do a really good job, I'm going to progress. If I do a really good job, I'm going to get promoted. If I do a really good job, this opportunity is going to be open for me. And that is true. That's the bottom line. You have to do a good job. However, sometimes it's about having that advocate, having that person that's going to help you because either A, they know the company better, or B, they're the decision makers. And the one thing that I say to people is Go to your HR person and ask them, who does my performance evaluations? Who does my promotion decisions? Who who approves my training? Like, know who the influences are. Know who is the person that you need to be the closest to. And then reach out to them and ask them how they are, what they're doing. Don't necessarily go and say, I need help with my career. I think it's reaching out and just establishing a relationship with people. And then, as you well know, then that becomes a relationship with someone else and someone else. But I think making big small and getting to who the people are in your network that are the most important and the most critical for you as an employee to have that relationship with.
Right. It is interesting that companies are so matrix that you're not sure who does your evaluations.
And that's why I tell you it's the most question I get, right? Which is, I think I have the right person. I'm not really sure. I'm not sure who should do my evaluation. Basically, like, who determines if I get a pay increase or not? Things of that nature, or a bonus, or that I can go off to this conference that is going to help me progress as far as my capability goes. And it's just really getting down to those basics, because once people understand that, then people are smart. They can do the networking, but they have to have the foundation of where they belong in the company and who the influencers are.
Right. That is excellent advice.
Yeah.
Amy, it was wonderful talking with you today. Do you have any
Thank
do you
you.
have any parting thoughts?
I think if I could have a parting thought, it would be more from the HR standpoint of just to your point, right? We need to be seen, the HR community, as trusted advisors, as sitting at the table. A company that does not have HR sitting at their executive table is missing out on a lot of not just policies, regulations, rules, right? But they're missing out on revenue, profitability, retention, recruiting. They're missing out on experts in the area. And that's what I encourage companies to do, is make sure HR is sitting at the table. That's my plug. And then I also would like to see, it's going to be a little controversial, but I would like to see companies who are invest in diversity, equity, inclusion, who are invest in nonprofits as corporate citizens, etc. I'd like to see them put their human capital on the table versus their dollars. I would like to see, instead of we do a volunteer day here or there, or we give 250,000 or $1 million to some company to help a nonprofit, which is great, don't get me wrong. I'd like to see this idea of taking my human capital and giving it to these smaller companies, these nonprofits, and then learning. And that way it can continue on, because some companies are not going to be able to afford the big, human resource information systems or the big SAP Oracles, Workday. They're not going to be able to afford to have that HR director or the finance lead, but they can, be invested in human capital from other companies that are willing to come and use their time and their human capital to help these companies progress. So I had to make a plug for that. It's one of my passions lately.
Right.
And so that's what I'd like to leave as a parting thought.
I think that's wonderful. Like, the volunteer day is good on so many levels, just like you just said, but even for your own employees feeling invested in your company. Like, even for
Exactly.
like selfish
Exactly.
reasons, if they did it for selfish reasons, for retention
Yeah.
and all of that, I think
Yeah, and the whole knowledge is power is not, it's an old statement, but it still holds true.
that's right. That's right. So, Amy, thank you so much for being here and making the time. It's been a pleasure.
Sure. It's been delightful, Jody. I thank you very much.
Thanks for listening. See you next time.
Thanks for listening to Tech Talent Today, brought to you by Clearmont Technologies IT Staffing and Search. You can find out more at clearmonttech.com. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe and share. See you next time.